Welcome to Inspiring Women with Laurie McGraw. I am your host, Laurie McGraw. I have spent the past 30 years in leadership, and over the years, I've come to learn one thing. Women need women, and not just any women, but inspiring women. Tune in every week to hear from women at the pinnacle of their careers and from others who are just starting out. Episodes can be found at inspiringwomen.show or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening, and I hope you will be inspired. This is Inspiring Women, and I am Laurie McGraw. Today, I'm speaking with Lita Tomas and her daughter, Jean Marie McNamara. Now, Lita and Jean just dropped a book this year that just came out. It's called Lita and Jean, Memoirs of Two Generations of Military Women, put out by Master Wings Publishing. Now, Lita and Jean, I'm really excited to be speaking today. It's November. Today is actually Veterans Day when we are dropping this episode, and November happens to be Veteran and Military Families Month. So I think this is going to be a particularly special conversation, and I want to welcome you both to Inspiring Women.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and honor to be here.
Yes, thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity.
Well, I am looking forward to this conversation. You know, just as we were sort of talking a little bit before we got started, I usually spend most of my Inspiring Women conversations speaking to women in the healthcare, innovation, and technology industry. But I think this is pretty special. Now, both of you are very familiar with healthcare, and Jean, you in particular, you know, I'll call you an expert in it. But I actually want to focus today really on, you know, the memoir that you put out, your service as military women. And let me also just thank you for that service, which is so important. What drew you to the military, why it's important, and then in particular, being women in the military. So just as we get started, you know, on Inspiring Women, I always like to start with the, what about today? What are you actually doing today? What does day-to-day look like for Lita and Jean?
Well, right now, we do a podcast every week about patients, inspiring other patients and letting them know that someone else has walked the same path that they are, and hopefully giving them a bit of a boost in knowing, you know, that there are some tips and tricks that might be able to help them through their healthcare journey. And that's called PodcastDX, shorthand for diagnosis.
When I started the podcast, I had never listened to a podcast in my life, and I didn't realize that there was a naming structure that you should use. So I named it PodcastDX.
Not realizing that maybe we should leave the podcast
out. I should have left the podcast.
But we're like 5 years in, so we're going to just keep it for now. But so on a daily basis, we're basically reading a lot of research about whatever topic is coming up so that we feel informed, and so that we can ask hopefully insightful questions that other people want to know.
And then the other thing that I'm doing is I've been working on a family tree through Ancestry in order to find out how many other people in my family have served in the military before us. And I have been really excited to find over 700 people in my family tree, and some notables like Meriwether Lewis from the Lewis and Clark expedition, and General Patton and his son, General Patton, and
Wow.
General Washington, and General George Washington.
Yeah.
So
We have a long military lineage that we really didn't know about.
it's been very exciting to find all that.
You know, that's incredible. And I know that just from reading your memoir, which I really enjoyed, you know, that you came to military service almost by accident. It wasn't because of that, you know, long history that you're now discovering. So maybe let's go into that a bit in terms of sort of, you know, the bio sketch, like where did it start? And maybe Lita, you could tell us, you know, what drew you to the military just from reading the book, and not to give it all away. I guess we'll give some of it away, but you know, it wasn't like that was something that, you know, you were drawn to because so many before you knew had done it. It was something else. So maybe give us a bit of that background.
correct. Thank you. My father and my uncle, I knew that they had served. I knew that because it was just knowledge, but it wasn't discussed. We didn't like sit around at the dinner table and talk about it. Nobody, once they served, they hung up their uniforms and that was it. And it just wasn't something that was really discussed. But when I was a very young mother, my girls were only probably 3 and 4 at the time. I was unfortunately in the middle of a very
contentious,
very nasty divorce, and I needed to get some type of a career behind me. And because I got married the day after high school, I obviously didn't have any college. It was hard. It was hard as a woman in the 1970s to make ends meet. And I was working several jobs, several part-time jobs. And in between 2 of my part-time jobs at a local mall, while running back and forth between the jobs, I ran across a recruiter booth, and the big sign on the booth said free college, and that's what drew me in. And I stopped in my tracks, and the next day I enlisted.
I also think it's hard probably for people today, listeners today, to also recognize that back in the 1970s, divorce wasn't sort of as commonplace or as easy being on the woman's side, so that it was a contentious divorce, sort of taking charge of what you're going to do personally for financial stability, for your own potential stability for your family, is a difficult time. I thought you did a really nice job sort of explaining that sort of, what it looked like back then from the perspective of it's not how we think about it today.
Right. Definitely. Right. The military also offers, in addition to education, it provides on-the-job training, and actual, there's class training, but then on-the-job traiing. And they also provide housing, and other resources. Stability, medical, dental, those healthcare things. And back then, that was a challenge to get.
It was. And my first, you'll have to read the book to get all the details, but my first enlistment was actually with the Air Force as a power plant mechanic, which is a aircraft engine mechanic. And living in the Chicago area at the time, there were 3 airports. Now there are 2 major airports. I thought, well, this would be great. Once I'm done with my 4 years with the Air Force, I come back, I work at O'Hare or Midway as an aircraft mechanic. I got to be making some good money then. And I was all excited about that. But that contentious divorce kind of jumped in the middle of it, and I had to get out of the Air Force before I even left, and I had to join the Army. And then I was a tank mechanic. And my first phone call was to my dad. And I said, Dad, we were talking about how great being an aircraft mechanic would be after I got out of the military, but what about a tank mechanic? Don't have many tanks in Chicago here. And he said, no, but there's heavy equipment, there's construction equipment. I mean, once you get that behind your belt, you'll be okay. So I said, okay, we'll just go for it. And I did.
And I think also at that time, it was rare for a woman to be a mechanic.
Oh, very rare.
Very
I was
rare.
the very first female mechanic at the CTA, which is the Chicago Transit Authority for their buses. And that was in 79.
Yeah, and I never said to my mom, oh, this is, like a male-dominated, never did that.
Very supportive.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's also incredible to me, Lita, not only was it a contentious divorce, it came from, just growing up history of lots of challenges and instability in family life. And so then going on to learn incredible skills, being the first, not just first mechanic, but first sort of integrated units with men and women. Mm-hmm. So lots of first in the military. And you really, from from what I've seen and just, getting a bit of your background, the amount of breaking new ground that you've done, whether it was intentional or not, you certainly paved the pathway for many others. And there's nothing about it that sounded easy, or that you necessarily had like key role models, either side by side or in front of you to pave that way. That was something that you forged yourself. Jean, when you looked at military service, you certainly had your mom to look to, but what drew you to it? So you did have somebody who was, a major part of your life where military was clearly quite important.
Absolutely. Just growing up as a military brat, I got to experience a lot of what military life was like, and also to learn that, you think military, you think someone with the weapon, but in the military, you could have a job in everything from advertising and like that kind of thing. You could be a photographer, you could be a chaplain, you could be a veterinarian. There's just such a plethora of job opportunities there that there's really something for everyone. And initially, I wanted to join the Peace Corps, and that was what I knew. I wanted to help people, and I wanted to help people, and I was trying to figure out how to go about doing that. And I thought at the time that I wanted to be a medical doctor. So I thought, well, I'll go to medical school and then I'll join the Peace Corps and I'll help people, or something like that, or Doctors Without Borders. And thankfully, my mom had a friend, her high school math teacher, who she is still friends with to this day, just to show you what kind of person she is. She has very long-lasting, dedicated friendships. He had gone to medical school and then realized he did not want to practice medicine. It wasn't his thing. So he went back to school and became, studied mathematics and became a math teacher, and an amazing math teacher at that. So based on that, she kind of said, you might want to try it out first. Mm-hmm. So
test the water.
Yeah, test the water. See if you like, medical care. Yeah, medicine. So she said, one option is to be, join the military and become a medic. And I thought, well, that was interesting. I'd be able to help people. They would provide the training and experience that I needed to know what I wanted, whether or not that was something I wanted to do. And I think she realized that my high level of empathy may be problematic with a future career in medicine. You can't internalize the pain or difficulties that someone else is going through when you're trying to treat them. That can be detrimental. So I did go that route and became a medic and realized that no, I am not, I was not destined for a career in medicine, and kind of switched it up and went for chemistry instead.
So study, more learning, more education. Lita, were you pushing Jean to go into the military? Was that a sort of once you were in, you served many, many years. So how was that something that was important to you to have your daughter go in, or were you?
Not at all.
Uh-huh.
Not at all. I never expected my daughters to follow me. I only did it. I didn't do it out of initially, I did not do it out of a love of country or a need to serve the country. I needed security to raise my girls,
mm-hmm.
and to do it safely. Once I was in, however, I developed a very deep love of country and service, and I would definitely put my uniform back on today if I was needed. But I didn't expect my girls to follow me. Never pushed them. I just opened doors and I said, whatever you want to do. And this is what she wanted to do. And I said, okay, then I guess we're going to carpool.
And I think I saw, from my parents' time in service, the great camaraderie that was there. And you form these friendships that last a lifetime and are truly amazing and transcend your military service.
Yeah, I ended up marrying again to a service member, and we both served in units next to each other, so we kind of paralleled each other, and Jean hopped on board right about that time.
Yeah, right about, well, just after. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Mhm.
But
she was never saying,
never saying you have to do this, you have to go
No,
and serve your country in this way.
Right, but from a very, very young age, whether or not she actually realized it, she taught us that service was something everyone should and should do.
But not necessarily in the military.
Not necessarily the military, but I learned to tie my shoes, tying the shoes of someone who had a stroke. Mm-hmm. She was constantly taking us to senior centers to volunteer, to teach anything that we knew how to teach, and to learn from those individuals because they had this wealth of knowledge attained from, sometimes a century of life experience. And so we did learn, and also just Meals on Wheels, we learned that you do need to be an active player in life, and you do need to take an active role in helping others, and that it can be beneficial in ways you can't even imagine.
Society works better when you're working together.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's just so interesting, Lita, to hear just, your draw to the military was for finding security and stability, for your family and for your future. And then, for you, Jean, that you learned through your mom as a role model, just that being of service to others, and then finding that ability to be of service to others through military service was where you found that footing. I want to talk about, I want to talk certainly about some of the challenges that are faced within military, because it's not all roses for certain. But before we do that, I want to talk more about the opportunity in terms of the skills opportunity. And both of you, when you joined, you did other things than what you first started doing in your military service. So Lita, you mentioned that you first joined the Air Force, and then, the cliff notes that I have are that you joined, then you were kicked out, and then they made you come back. How did that what happened there?
Well, back in the 70s, I don't know what the law is today.
It has recently changed.
Okay, but back in the 70s, you could not join the military if you were divorced.
Amazing.
Could not. And I did not know that. All right. So when I first signed up with the Air Force recruiter on that day after I ran into him at the mall, he said, "Are you married?" "Yes." You have children?" "Yes." He didn't say, "Are you about to get a divorce next week?" He didn't ask that question. I didn't answer it, and I didn't know that it was important to the conversation. It wasn't like I was keeping anything. I just didn't know it was an important part of the conversation. So I went home, a member of the Air Force. Well, the next day I went to court, my ex-husband said, "Oh no, I don't want her joining the Air Force. I'll never see the kids. Nope, can't do it. Absolutely not." So I kind of looked at my lawyer. I said, "Now what do I do?" He said, "You have to get out." Mm-hmm. I went back to the recruiter and I said, "I'm sorry, I have to get out." He said, "You can't do that." I said, "But my husband said that he won't let me do it because we're getting a divorce and he won't see the kids." He said, "Oh, you're getting a divorce. You have an open court date. Okay, fine, you can get out." So he canceled my contract. I went back to court the next week. I said, "All right, I'm out." He said, "You know what, I thought about it, and maybe it is a good idea." And I besides the fact that you can't throttle somebody in a courtroom, I just gave him a look that could kill, and I said, "Now what am I supposed to do?" Mm-hmm. So I took a lunch break from court, and I grabbed a cab. I went to the other side of Chicago, back to the recruiter's office, and I said, "Guess what? He said it's okay now." And the Air Force recruiter said, "Well, I can't take you. I'm aware that you're getting a divorce and you have children." He said, "But you know what? My buddy across the hall, he doesn't know about that." And that was the first time that my eyes widened, and I'm like, "You mean we're going to be doing this kind of under the covers and not really?" He said, "No, don't say anything, just come over here." So we went across the hall and I joined the Army.
And what a career from there in terms of the many, many years of service, the skills as a tank mechanic, and, what you went on to do. Just incredible. Jean, for you, when you started and you left because of an injury, maybe give us a little bit of that background in terms of what you started to do, changed to do, and then
Sure.
what led to, what you're doing today.
Sure. I joined as a medic, and although I don't think my personality was well suited for being a medic, I was, diligent in my career, and I did serve out my contract. So I served 6 years, and then I re-enlisted for a year. And at that time, I kind of realized that, I wasn't going to go into medicine, was not my career field of choice, and I was going to focus more on chemistry. So I applied to officer candidate school, and I was accepted to officer candidate school. I was also, I guess, a little disenfranchised by what my unit did on a day-to-day basis. We did physicals, and then when we were in the field, we were treating patients as they came in with different conditions. So we weren't practicing on a day-to-day basis what we needed to do in the field, and I found that a bit frustrating because I just, I wanted more of a connection there. And my unit was actually disbanded, and I was sent to a new unit. And the day I went there, they were testing for all of the different, treating all the different medical conditions that you might see in the field. And I was so excited because I was like, oh my gosh, this unit gets it. This unit is intent on doing the job that they're there for. And then I got called into the commander's office, and they said, oh, you're going to OCS, and the rest of the unit is going to Bosnia. And I was like, I want to go to Bosnia. But they said, no, you're going to officer candidate school. So I went to officer candidate school, and I was commissioned, and went into the nuclear, biological, chemical, and radiological corps, and went for training there. And I would always like to try to obtain lofty goals. I wanted to, learn everything I could. I wanted to excel. And so when the opportunity for my platoon to participate in a German efficiency badge, not competition, but to work towards a German efficiency badge, which means that you're basically doing like a decathlon. You're doing a 15-mile road march with your equipment, and it's a timed event. You're doing a high jump. You're doing a sprint. You're doing a swim. You're firing a Glock. You're competing in all these different events, and the culmination of that is a medal that you can wear on your uniform, on your dress uniform. So I wanted to participate in that as well, and unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess it depends on your perspective, the last event was the high jump, which is something I had never done before. And by the time we got to this event, there were so few of us left, because as you go through one event to the next, you get weeded out. So if you don't complete your 15-mile road march on time, you're eliminated. If you can't qualify with a Glock, you're eliminated. If you can't do the swim in time, you're eliminated. So by the time we got to this final event, there were only, I want to say, 4, possibly 5 individuals left. And my platoon leader, who was a full-time officer, and was there for training and supervision, kind of walked me through what a high jump is. And they set up tumbling pads to that height of a high jump mat, which it turns out do not have any give and can't take the impact. So I ended up, my brain herniated into my spinal column. My spinal column went into my brain, and my shoulder blade was torn off. And that basically ended my career. It was
How long ago was this, Jean?
It was 22 years ago.
April of 2000.
It's hard to hear it now, even though it's been that while ago. I mean, it's just hard to hear it. Just devastating injury.
Well, and it took 4 years to Because for 4 years, they basically said, you're fine, you have a cervical strain. And I thought, okay, I'm fine. I have a cervical strain. So I would go to physical therapy and try really hard, and I would cry through physical therapy sessions because I'm like, okay, I don't know why my hand is weak. I don't know why my fingers are curling up. I don't know why one side of my face and one side of my neck doesn't look like the other side. I don't know why I'm choking on food. I don't know why I stop breathing at night. And it was really frustrating because I thought, well, why, why am I having all of these difficulties when I was extremely athletic before, had none of these problems, and now I can't stand up without passing out. Mm-hmm. But luckily, because, and at the time I was getting my medical care, I was living in Chicago, my parents were taking care of me, and I was having to fly to Fort Knox for medical evaluations. But they said, oh, well, you know what, you could go to Great Lakes, which is 45 minutes away. So I went to Great Lakes. They did an MRI of my head and neck, and they said, okay, you need to have surgery. We're going to try to figure out how quickly we can get you in, because there's a lot going on.
And they sent us to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, and we had to consult with a Air Force surgeon.
Neurosurgeon.
Because at the time, everybody was deployed. What happened?
No, I just wanted to get a drink. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Can I just take your drink?
Yeah. At the time, everyone was deployed. This was in 2000. Oh, I'm sorry, 2004. Excuse me, 2004. Everyone was deployed because of 9/11, and there weren't any neurosurgeons in the United States. Everyone was overseas. So they sent us to this one guy in Ohio, and he said, oh yeah, I can fix this. And he said, no problem. And I said, how many have you done, sir? He said, well, I haven't done any, but I saw one done. And I said, so you're gonna do brain surgery on my daughter, and you've never done it before, but you think that's a good idea? Let's say it was your daughter. Would you want to go to a doctor that had never done it before? He said, no, I can understand if you'd like to go somewhere else. I said, thank you, sir. So I went somewhere else, and we had to write to Congress to get authorization to have the surgery done at a civilian hospital.
Where they do the procedure several times a day.
Yeah.
So just in terms of that whole, and obviously you've gone through a long recovery, and that sort of changed your course, your career course, and certainly military service. How do you think about it, Jean? I mean, there's so many positives that you talk about in terms of, military service and the opportunities that are available. And you've certainly dedicated a lot of your life now to providing information for others when they, receive diagnoses, what they mean, what is treatment look like. Did you feel let down? Did you feel that, or did you feel just, clearly your mother was, perhaps your biggest advocate at the time as you were trying to sort through that?
I definitely think I was frustrated with the system in many ways. And in one respect, I was relieved because I was like, okay, so this is why I'm having all of these problems. And I was hoping that surgery would be, would fix it and I would be done. So it was a sense of, extreme relief and disappointment at the same time. And after, then they did sit me down and say, well, first of all, there's a 50% chance that you won't survive the procedure. And I was like, oh, okay. And even after the procedure, they said, because it's been so long since your injury, it's going to take a really long time to get everything, everything for your recovery. It's going to take a very long time. And they said, and some things might not come back because it's also, because of where it was, it's at the base of your brain that is responsible for your breathing, all the things you're not conscious of doing. So my digestive system is affected. All of that is affected and is still affected today. So I did, it was difficult. The procedure, the recovery was very difficult. And then they went on to fix my shoulder and they fixed that. I had to go for 2 procedures for that. Then I went back for another procedure for my head and spine, and then it was like, okay, now we can roll with recovery, and that meant learning to talk. I have not severe, but I have aphasia, so I can't think of the word that I'm thinking of. So learning how to deal with that, and not only did I have to learn, but my mother had to learn how to help me with that, and then also learning to walk. To my balance is still off and is mediated by medication. So without those medications, I can't walk around. And just accepting that my life would never be the same.
That was in 2000, right?
Mm-hmm.
The accident was in 2000, and we just went to her cardiologist last week because she's still having problems to this day, and we're not sure if it's neuro or cardio, so she's got to go for some cardiac tests, and we got her in for the first neuro appointment we could get with a specialist, which is next year. But it affected her
right, the rest of my life, right. And I think accepting that is very difficult. And also, the military is such a, I don't want to say like all-encompassing thing, but it does, it is like not a lifestyle, but almost like a lifestyle.
It is.
So even retirees, people that are retiring from the military, have difficulty transitioning into the civilian world, and it's a challenge. But I think my having lost my career, my future potential, and just that sense of belonging was very, 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 very hard.
So maybe I want to dig into that a little bit more. So we've talked a bit about sort of, both of you just speak with pride of the opportunity that comes with military service. Jean, just as you described that incredible injury that now is sort of a lifelong recovery in terms of what that means, and change the trajectory of what you expected for yourself. But now certainly, with empathy, you continue to be in service of others and working together with your mom, with Lita, with your podcast, and now providing this memoir. Maybe it can turn to a bit about the military from the perspective of the challenges as women in the military. I don't think it's any secret that we know that there's gender bias there. Lita, you described that you were one of the first platoons, if you will, that were integrated. Maybe if you could just describe some of the gender differences that you've seen. Has it changed over time? And then I want to talk a little bit about the difference between military life and civilian life in that transition.
Well, yes, I was, before my platoon started training, it was not integrated. So in other words, if it was a woman, if women wanted to serve in the military, they served in the WACS, the Women's Army Corps. And the day that I started, it was all integrated. So we had in our barracks 1 floor of women and 2 floors of men. So we slept in
wild.
The same building, which was absolutely unheard of. But it worked. We made it work. We weren't looked well. We were supposed to be the same training as the men, but my drill sergeant was always being chastised by the other drill sergeants that, he had the pansy platoon, he had the women platoon, and poor drill sergeant Duggar, you got the pansies. Well, we didn't realize it, but a friend of mine, I made friends with this one black girl from the south side of Chicago, who was just a phenomenal runner. She could run rings around anybody, and I hated running. So we made friends, and I told her I needed help with running. So during our last event, before we graduated, we were supposed to run as a group, and because the pansies obviously couldn't keep up with the men, we were put at the back end of the group to run. The first platoon of men started running, the second platoon of men started running, and then our platoon started running. Well, myself and my bunkmate here, we took off running like bats out of you-know-what. And we ended up coming in before anybody in the second platoon and about halfway through the first platoon. So we just beat the pants off of all of them. And
So,
when we came in to the finish line, our drill sergeant was there, and we could tell that he was catching hell from the other guys. And he told me this afterwards. He said, "Yeah, they were giving me a hard time." And then I said, "Wait a minute, isn't that a couple of my pansies coming in right now, beating the hell out of all your guys?" So we kind of showed them. And,
that's amazing. What a feel-good story.
yeah, I never let it stop me. But then when I got to my first duty station as a mechanic, I got to my office. I reported to the office, to the shop chief, and he said, "Okay, McNamara," because I was a McNamara back then. He said, your typewriter's over there. This is the office where we take in reports and we send out parts for mechanics to fix their trucks or whatever." I said, no, sir. I'm a mechanic." He said, "Yeah, but you want to be in here, right, with the other girls?" I said, "No, sir. I want to be out there under a truck. That's what I trained to do. I wanted to do this." He said, "Okay, give her a toolbox." And I went to work.
Whereas 20 years later, or about 20 years later, I walked into an office when I was assigned to a field artillery unit as a medic, and they said, "Oh, okay, your typewriter is right over there." And I said, "Well, I don't type. I don't know how to type. I am not a typist, but I can go help that guy that's in cardiac arrest over there." And proceeded to be the medic for that unit while I was attached.
So what's interesting about that is just that, you know, the pre-understanding of where you should be, but both of you reacted the same way in terms of like, I appreciate being typecast, if you will, over here, but this is where my skill set wants to be. And you both stood up. So, you know, like mother, like daughter, clearly.
Yeah, and I didn't tell her that story before, so I
had no idea.
When we wrote the book, our stories came out.
And we both laughed. We were like, "Oh my gosh."
Neither of us had known about the other's story about that. It was kind of fun.
But as you
let me ask you about.
Oh, good.
Let me ask you about the book. Like, why did the two of you decide to write a book? And what was that? What was the process of writing a memoir? What was that like?
We both did start talking about how similar our careers were. I mean, we both joined the military. We both went to Fort Jackson for basic training. We both had just many of the same type of experiences as women in the military. And as we started to talk about that in public and give presentations in public for different things, it was like, oh, wow, even though there was that time, big time difference, a lot of the things had not changed.
Right.
So it was just fascinating. And then the book took us a lot longer to write, I think, than we had anticipated.
It was very cathartic.
It was also painful, very, very painful. Just having to dredge up all of those painful memories. We have gone through not only, everything that we've talked about already, but that we've also gone through several home floods. So we've lost a great deal with flooded homes and also one house fire. So we don't have all of the paperwork that we probably once had, but we do have dozens of legal sized boxes full of paperwork from all of the communications back and forth between my commander and myself, or my commander and my mother, regarding my medical condition and the need for treatment, and begging for care and just saying like something needs to be done, and that was painful.
I think that was my impetus for writing, the fact that I thought, if there's other people out there that are in situations similar to Jean, they need to know that they have to advocate for themselves. They have to push. They can't just allow some first lieutenant commander to control your life when it's your health that's at risk. I just was beyond myself.
Well, if there's one thing that really came through in that memoir, And it's not hard to imagine, Jean, that it was painful to go through some of the stories that you share. Both of you, they're raw. Quite frankly, they're raw, and you're sharing a lot about yourself. But what did come through from my perspective was certainly the love you each have for each other, and the strength together that you have for each other, and the standing up for what is right. I mean, that is, what I took from a lot of the just sharing of stories, and it was hard to just, how long it took, whether it was to get care or whether it was to, get the recognition that you were seeking. That was just that was a theme throughout from the I will say shared and individual experiences is what I read through.
And there has been a lot of change, and I think we kind of alluded to it a little bit in the book, but like now, if someone is a single parent, they can join the military. There's more services and support, and if you have an issue, although it's still problematic, hopefully you can reach out to someone and get help. And things are changing and will continue to change. And also the standards for like physical fitness are changing so that men and women are on like a more even playing field. And we've been excited to watch those changes take place, and are thrilled that, the future is looking brighter for women in service.
When you think about the challenges that you've gone through, the writing of the memoir, what are the lessons that you want for women today who are facing, whether it's advocating for service in the military or whether it's just advocating for themselves? What is the advice that you give women today as they think about and pursue their own career journeys?
I would say that harassment of any kind is unacceptable. I don't care what level it's coming from. It's unacceptable for any reason. Yeah. And if they are not getting the reaction or if someone isn't interceding and affecting change, they need to go elsewhere and possibly outside of the military to make sure that it stops. So if you observe it, or if you are someone is feeling harassed, it needs to stop. It's unacceptable at any level for any reason.
Right.
What advice would you give, Lita?
I agree with that advice completely. And the other advice I would say is always keep records.
Oh, yeah.
of anything that happens to you in your life. If you want to start journaling or something along that line, but keep records, because you never know when you need to reach back and grab something for evidence or
just even, if you want to one day, tell stories to your great grandchildren about what life was like, it helps to revive your memory. And there have been some incidences in history, in pretty recent history, where complete sections of military files were lost due to fire.
Right.
So you always want to keep, track of everything. And even if you're in the civilian world, making note of your accomplishments and your challenges can help you when you're looking to your future and trying to say, like, where do I want to be next year? What are my goals for the next 5 years? Or if you're going in for that promotion, annotating what the year has been like and what accomplishments and challenges you've faced can be really beneficial. And then also saying, here's the challenge I want to meet next year. And looking forward while always maintaining a record of the past.
You're both strong advocates for women and for women standing up for themselves, and military has clearly shaped both of your lives in very, very significant ways. For everything that you've gone through, and again, those stories that you share in this memoir, is military a career trajectory, a life of service in that way? Is that something that you would both recommend for women still?
I would. We have one of our friends just recently wrote a book about women joining the military, and we'll send you a link to that and what women should know going into the military. But I think that service in some way. So maybe you don't feel comfortable joining the military, but you want to act locally, be on your local voting board, volunteer at a local hospital, help deliver meals to those who, need meals and can't get out. Anything you can do to make a slight difference or a huge difference in someone else's life is not only benefiting them in society, it's also going to benefit you as well. We have a friend who volunteers to co-dive with individuals who have physical or mental challenges. And, he's found that extremely therapeutic for himself as well. And I think anything you can do, you should try to do, because it can be really, volunteer for the local reading program. Just if you not sacrifice, but if you give to others, I think you'll get something back. And I think the military, because it is, the way the world is, we do need a strong military to not only protect our interests, but protect the interests of those who cannot, protect themselves.
Right, and the military still offers phenomenal benefits.
Yes.
As far as lifelong benefits, if you want to make a career out of it. And the job opportunities are endless now, because now all jobs are open to women. So yeah, we're big proponents still.
Yes.
Well, I'll tell you what, this has just been such a great conversation. I mean, clearly you are both such strong advocates for not just women, but also supporters of just the life of service. It really comes through in your comments. And, I certainly on this Veterans Day, again, say thank you to you both, and also for sharing your stories. I really enjoyed reading your memoir, Lita and Jean, Memoirs of Two Generations of Military Women, from Master Wings Publishing. And Lita and Jean, thank you so much for being on Inspiring Women.
You.
This has been an episode of Inspiring Women with Laurie McGraw. Please subscribe, rate, and review. We are produced by Kate Cruz at Executive Podcast Solutions. More episodes can be found on inspiringwomen.show. I am Laurie McGraw, and thank you for listening.